Now joined by Mark McCloskey. He is the St. Louis homeowner we told you about in that video that's all over social media. He and his wife holding guns, keeping protesters away, in their opinion, from their home on a private street.
The St. Louis couple called Mark and Patricia McCloskey became folk heroes to many across the country after they were confronted by a mob, a dangerous mob, outside their home and returned with firearms to protect it. And this is what you were taught to do. It's what generations of Americans have done. It's the most basic right of all, the right of self-defense. The McCloskeys exercised that right.
How do you feel about becoming the face of political resistance to the Black Lives Matter movement?
First of all, that's a completely ridiculous statement. I'm not the face of anything opposing the Black Lives Matter movement. I was a person scared for my life who was protecting my wife, my home, my hearth, my livelihood. I was a victim of a mob that came through the gate. I didn't care what color they were. I didn't care what their motivation was. I was frightened, I was assaulted, and I was in imminent fear that they would run me over, kill me, burn my house. And you have to have this in the context of St. Louis, where on June the 2nd of this year, I watched the city burn. I watched the 7-Eleven get smashed in, looted, and burned for 40 minutes on live television with nobody showing up to do anything. And I realized at that time we're on our own. When bad things happen, they unpredictably turn really bad, real fast. That same night, retired St. Louis Police Captain David Dorn was murdered. These things get very bad very quickly, and when those people came through the gate, when it was a mob, I didn't take the time to see their birth certificates or anything else. I was defending my house, my life, my wife, and what I've spent 32 years building there. Well, Tucker, you got to understand, my house sits right on the edge of a road called Kings Highway, and our private place is Portland Place, where my wife and I were preparing to have dinner, maybe 70 feet from the gate. By the time we looked up and we saw the marchers coming down Kings Highway and getting loud, we looked over at the gate, and there's no police there. Our private security wasn't there. Nobody's there, and I look over at my wife, and I see all these people outside the gate, and then the gate bursts open. People start coming in, and then a flood of people start coming in. They're angry, they're screaming, they've got spittle coming out of their mouth. They're coming towards the house.
I understand what you say your rationale was. To be clear, did anything happen to you or your property?
Hello to all my friends on YouTube. It has become increasingly difficult to work on my upcoming projects. I would so like to keep my channel alive and provide for my audience. Hopefully, some additional funding would enable me to keep going. I'm asking if anyone who can, donate as much or as little as they choose to my channel. I don't expect vast amounts, but a little would go a long way. Any kind of contribution to the upkeep of my work would be very much appreciated. Thank you again and happy listening.
Did anything happen to you or your property?
Did anything happen? Yeah, my life has been ruined.
No, we'll get to that, Mr. McCloskey. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm saying that night, did anything happen to you, your family, or your property?
Yeah, it's called social intimidation. It's called terrorism. Chris, what's the definition of terrorism? To use violence and intimidation to frighten the public. That's what was happening that night. It's what happened to me, and that's the damage I suffered.
You were the one pointing a loaded weapon at a group of people who were walking past looking for the mayor's house as a point of protest.
No, I'm doing Chris, that's an entirely false concept. No single media outlet has ever mentioned the complete falsity of that statement. The mayor's house cannot be reached through my neighborhood.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Lyda Cruson lives up on a road called Lake and Washington. That's 3 blocks north and a half a mile west of my house.
So where do you think they were going?
They were going through a private neighborhood for the intention of going through a private neighborhood, in my humble opinion. In retrospect, at the time I didn't have any time to think about this. However, the leader of the entity called Expect Us that organized this, whatever it was, announced ahead of time that he does not want to have a peaceful protest. He wants to have it be as disruptive as possible. And when interviewed subsequently, he said, I know it was illegal, I know it was a private neighborhood, but when you're doing protests of this nature, it's necessary to break the law to get your ends met. And that's what was happening. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that hundreds of people screaming, shouting, angry, broke through the private gate. Everything inside that gate is private property.
Right.
Any pretense of protest as opposed to terrorism ended when they broke through that gate.
Terrorism is a strong word, Counselor, don't you think? I mean, let's stipulate for the point of this conversation,
Chris,
that they went through the private. Look, I let you make your points. Let the rejoinders happen, and then you can go.
Sure, sure.
You got counsel with you. You're safe, I promise. The idea that they broke the law, I give it to you. They went through a private gate. I'm sure you have video of it, or somebody can prove that. I stipulate they went through the gate. But they're yelling, they're angry. They did not go up your steps. They didn't go to your house. They didn't touch you. They didn't try to enter your home. They didn't try to do anything to your kids. But you say you were assaulted. You're using the civil definition of that, which is that you had the apprehension that something bad was going to happen to you. But nothing did. But to call terrorism, when the people are there protesting how the community is treated by the police, is a little bit of reverse psychology at a minimum, is it not?
When I saw that mob come through the gate with their rage and their anger, I thought that we would be overrun in a second. By the time I was out there with my rifle, the people were 20 or 30 feet from my front wall. I've got a low wall that separates the house from my front yard. And so I was literally afraid that within seconds they would surmount the wall, come into the house, kill us, burn the house down, and everything that I'd worked for and struggled for the last 32 years. Tucker, I lived out in West St. Louis County in a nice, secure neighborhood. 32 years ago, we moved into the city and took on a project to restore a house that nobody else wanted. And you know, we were urban pioneers in those days, and we've been there ever since, working to build and maintain St. Louis in this very historic neighborhood. And I saw it all going up in flames and my life destroyed in an instant. And I did what I thought I had to do to protect my hearth, my home, and my family. No, you're absolutely wrong. The reason why they did not get up my steps was that my wife and I were there with weapons to keep them off our steps.
How do you know?
Because they were coming at us until I displayed the weapon, and that stopped them. I came out.
So do you wait? I'm sure a house like that. I'm sure a house like that has cameras. Do you have video of them coming up the steps and being in your house?
I'm not going to discuss the level of my private security on national television.
Oh,
that's not a topic.
But do you have proof of them actually approaching your house?
You know, Chris, this is not a Black Lives Matter movement issue.
Well, no one was protecting you, and they were screaming at you and threatening to murder your dog and harm you and your wife. What do you make of the attacks on you for doing what we used to believe every homeowner had an obligation to do? Why are they denouncing you as a racist?
I don't understand. And you know, here's the interesting thing. I've spent my career defending people that are defenseless, for people that are having a hard time making their miracle happen, for people that don't have a voice. My black clients love us. The night that this happened, I had some of our black clients calling us up till 2:30 in the morning, telling us how wrong it was the way the press was writing us up, telling how wrong it was that we should be portrayed as racist. This is what I do for a living. I help people that are down and that need a hand, and the people that need a voice. To call us racist is ridiculous, and it had nothing to do with race. I wasn't worried what the race was of these the mob that came through my gate, I was worried that I was going to be killed. I didn't care what race they were.
It's disgusting. Very quickly, Mr. Watkins, do you think that the McCloskeys face the risk of being prosecuted in this?
Well, given the fact that we have a political animal in the circuit attorney's office, there is a risk. If the law prevails, long-standing Missouri law prevails, they're fine.
Yep. Boy, we're certainly rooting for you. This is really a revealing moment and a travesty. I'm glad you're well. Thank you for coming on tonight.
But they were protesting, and he has become the face. How so? The president retweeted this for a reason, Counselor.
He became the face involuntarily.
But I'm not saying it was voluntary. I'm saying, why do you think the president retweeted it, Counselor?
Look, you can talk all night. You can let me answer.
I just asked you a question. Answer it. Why do you think the president retweeted it?
Oh, that's a separate question.
No, that's the one I'm asking.
Well, that's a second question.
Maybe you should ask the president.
Here, you should ask the president.
He doesn't answer my questions.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
But he answers by his actions.
I'm not going to speak for the president. In fact, quite frankly, I find it probably an impossibility for anyone to speak for the president. And that's assuming one wants to say the president speaks.
I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Mr. McCloskey, this is what I'm saying. The president retweeted this thing for a reason. Why do you think he retweeted it?
You know, I don't have any idea why the president retweeted it. I've not seen it, not seen the retweet. I think you ought to ask the president. And if he, you know, I was reluctant to come on your.
He deleted it.
I was reluctant to come on your show for a similar reason. But let me say this: you said it was protesting police brutality. That's absolutely inaccurate. The announced purpose for this event was to ask the mayor, Lyda Crewson, whose own husband was murdered in her driveway in that same house years ago, in front of her and her kids, okay? That's how undangerous these things are. The alleged purpose of this event was to ask her to resign for doxing protesters.
Right.
But guess what? Have I been doxed? Have those very people that were walking down my street screaming death threats at me and threatening to burn my house and kill my dog and what rooms in my house they were going to live in after they killed me, do you think them then distributing my information all over the Western Hemisphere is different than what they're asking the mayor to resign for doing? This hypocrisy is just obvious nonsense.
Look, again, Mr. McCloskey, I don't like that you have been weaponized for political means. I'm not saying that you weren't within your rights to do what you were doing. That will be judged by the system. That's not why I'm having you on the show, as I said at the top. And you said I didn't want to come on the show. Listen, I think I'm fair. I'm not going to use you as a pawn to advance my own agenda like the show you just went on, which is where somebody wants people to see Black Lives Matter as inimical to the American cause. I don't make those kinds of judgments for people. But the guy who just walked past your house on the looping piece of video had hands up, don't shoot on this. The stated purpose of this demonstration, and that's all we can go on, is that they didn't like that the mayor outed, or as you say, doxed people who were for defunding the police. And now you can like that or not like that, but you have been used and politically weaponized as a face of white resistance to that movement. And that's why I asked you that. Not because that's how you see yourself, but that's how you're being seen. And I wanted to give you a chance with counsel to respond to that. I don't see, I don't see how you could see that as an unfair question.
My client has, since the very outset of this publicity, made it really, really clear the last thing he wanted to do, and he and his wife are both appalled at the prospect of being utilized as a rallying call for people sitting in Barco loungers with a Confederate flag behind them and a 12 gauge in their hand. My clients have fought as lawyers for 3+ decades for the civil rights of people of color. My clients are completely behind and endorse the message of BLM. What they are not capable of doing is embracing the abject utilization of that noble message that we all need to hear over and over and over again as a license to rape, rob, pillage, bowl over all of our rights for a man to have to worry.
By the way.
Oh, I beg your pardon. When you have a man and a wife on their property in their home in a full-on assault occurring by
What
a
full-on
mob.
assault?
That,
They're
by
walking
the way,
down the street
wait
in
a
front of
second.
the house,
Oh,
Mr. Watkins.
I beg your pardon. That's not correct.
Chris,
you don't have your facts
Chris,
correct.
I'm
you
just
were
looking
not
at
there.
the video.
I think everything might have been easier had people not brought the guns out. I have to agree with Joy. If you believe that they're marching for the right reasons, then say, listen, we support y'all. Go ahead, she's over there. Go ahead and we'll march with you in a little bit. We're going to walk the dog and then we'll come and be with you. You know, they could have done anything, but once you bring out the AK-47 that you don't know how to handle, and handgun that you don't, you know, I can't see Jack, but whatever it is, you know, it has to, you know, people have to do a better, we just have to do a better job. Go ahead, Sonny.
Using a weapon they clearly don't know how to use.
Truly don't know how to
We
use.
have a legal note.
Sorry.
We have a legal note. In a statement released through their attorney, Mark and Patricia McCloskey claimed that they witnessed violence, destruction of property, and acts of threatening aggression by some of the protesters, which gave rise to trepidation and fear of imminent and grave harm.
Mm-hmm.